Hello everybody and welcome back. Today in the workshop we have the Chinese Elm. Nair is the specific species. Nair 2.0. Don't necessarily know what the significance of it is, the 2.0 part of it is, but I do know that that was what was on the container that I got it in, said. So I don't know if it's a crossbreed between a Nair and maybe a Seiju, or a Nair and a Hokkaido, or Nair and something else, I don't know. As you can see, it's grown really well this year. We've got some good separation now, like for instance these branches have split, so unfortunately they've done it a little bit higher than what I would like them to be. We're going to look at this tree in depth today and try to figure out what we want for the ultimate final height of the tree, so we know what we need to do as far as designing from here. If you remember last year, I kind of just let it grow crazy, so this wound here, this large wound area in here would heal, and it's done really well, but now's the time to start focusing on ramification and getting it to where we want it to be as far as a final height and design, so we can work on getting some serious ramification. In the broom style, you always have you know, a 2, and then you cut those 2 off and they make 4, and then they make on and on and on. So we'll do a quick 360 of this tree, and then I'm just going to do some cuts on it, and that's pretty much it for this year. It's got a nasty wound right here that didn't heal from last year's cut. I had a battle with some squirrels, so it's going to get cut back pretty severe this year, and we'll build our branches up from there. So it's got a decent base. The moss is starting to grow up the trunk. I'm going to have to brush all that off, because what will happen is the moss will eat away at the craggy bark on these cork bark species, and it'll basically rot off. So we want to keep that under control as much as possible as well. It's got some damage here on this back branch, so you know it needs some work. So we're going to go ahead and take care of what we need to do with it this year and focus on it. Last year I didn't really do a whole lot to it because I was battling squirrels. I had it pretty much where I wanted it to be, and I came out 2 days later and the squirrels decided they wanted to prune it as well, and they ate a bunch of the branches off, so kind of set me back a little bit, but not a big deal. So that's where we are right now. It's going to take me a little time to have an idea of what I want to do on the tree. I guess I'll go through my thought process with you guys so you can kind of see what I'm thinking. In a way, ultimately, I'd like the very top of this tree to be somewhere into this area. And in order to have that, of course, and get all the so I've got to build ramification basically from here to here. And the total canopy of the tree is going to be something like this. It's going to be a rounded canopy, more so than a triangulated canopy, because of course it is a broom style tree. So of course this is way too high for the final design. I might have the final canopy at about right here, but I think for the height of that the trunk is from the ground, not necessarily the thickness, but you know, the shorter, tighter canopy that makes the trunk look a lot larger. Now this trunk's probably about as big around as a pop can. So, you know, 2.5, 3 inches at best. And, you know, it will continue to grow, but not a whole lot, because it's in the point in its development where we're going to be working on ramification. Now, if I was working on extension growth and things like that, the trunk would thicken up a lot faster, but now that we're just focusing on the ramification portion of it, the trunk's not going to grow as much or as thick or as rapidly as it would if we were just letting it grow crazy. So this is what we're kind of shooting for, is this V, this, you know, from 1 you get 2 effect. Unfortunately, I didn't get a whole lot of that where I wanted it to be. Actually, if you look at this one here, this is 2 from 1. So we're going to keep this. I'm just going to cut it way back to here and here, and then we'll get 2 more. And then we'll get 2 more after we cut it back, etc., etc. So by eliminating all the growth down to here, it's going to cause this thing to back bud immensely. This thing back buds immensely every year, so it's not something that I'm really worried about. Let's look at the back branch here as well. You know, we got a nice thick growth, and then it goes to a smaller smaller piece. I'm probably going to cut this one. Matter of fact, I'm just going to go ahead and do it now. I'm going to cut this one back to here because right above there we do have some damage to the branch. Now these other superfluous branches here, we're going to want to remove those as well, so we can kind of tell the tree where we want it to grow. So I'm going to come in here, and these were all back buds last year, so we don't want any of this trying to take over. So we've got to come back in here, remove all of that. Now we do have some dormant buds. We got a dormant bud here, here, and back here, so those are the ones that are going to be creating this year's growth and the subsequent ramification on this tree. And that's pretty much it for that one. I'm going to kind of clean up some of this down here. It's getting a little bulbous. Of course, it is a corkbark species, so you can get away with a little bit of that, but we want to try to keep it as clean as we can. So that's the back branch for this year. Now let's move to the secondary branch, or secondary trunk, I should say, here. It's a little bit lower. It is the side trunk, but it is a little bit lower than the other two. And I did kind of want it to get a little thicker than it is, but something you need to remember is when you're doing this, you want multiple thicknesses, even on the 3 main trunks or the 5 main trunks or the 7 main trunks of your broom style tree. That way you definitely have a dominant trunk, and then you've got a secondary and a third, a second and a third, or however you want to name it. So realistically, the front trunk, of course, is the largest one, the thickest one, so it is the dominant trunk. This one here in the rear is actually the secondary trunk. It grew a lot better than the side trunk did here. So it's a secondary trunk, but it is in the back, which is fine. That's going to create some depth. And then the third trunk, or the subordinate trunk, is this one here that's on the side. Now also, your splits you're going to want to make your splits at different heights as well. It just breaks up the monotony of everything being exactly the same height and exactly the same location. So the front one is going to be, well, you see this one here that we've just done. It's about mid canopy of where we want it to be final. The main one is actually going to be up here, so it's going to be the highest because it is the dominant. And then the third one here is we're going to want to make it the subordinate of the two. And it's going to be a little difficult to try to cut it off any lower than what we're going to want to. It's almost going to be at the same height as this one here, but not quite. I've got the dormant bud here, which is a good maybe 2.5, 3 inches below where this one was cut back to. So I'm going to cut back to here. I may get some back budding in this area as well. But we're going to want to try to make it split off. So if I'm here, I'll get it there. I'm going to get it right here. Actually, I'm going to get even larger. One thing I've also wanted to mention, these cutters, they are pretty expensive, and I would recommend investing in a little bit larger size. I've gone through maybe 4 of these, and I've done it for 18, 19 years, and I've gone through 4 of these because I've tried to use a smaller cutter to cut a branch that really should be cut with a larger one. So these cutters should be, smaller size stuff. When you start getting into thicker branching stuff like that, either use a saw or these, because it's really easy to just want to torque down on them, and you end up bending the cutting surface here where they line up, and then they're pretty much ruined from there. So let's get back to this. Alright, I'm going to cut it right here. Now you can see on these two, there is a height difference between where I've cut these two. So this one here will have its first set of branches up here. This one's going to have it a little bit lower. Direction is another thing. I've got a dormant bud on this side and on this side. for this one. So it's going to shoot out like this. So I'm going to have a branch going this way and a branch going this way. This one here, I've got a branch coming out this way and a branch coming back this way towards the center of the tree. So we're going to have one. Let's clean this up real quick for demonstration purposes. So this branch is going to have two coming out like this, and then this one is actually going to have two coming out like this. So that way I can fill in the center area at the same time I'm filling out this area. And something you're also going to want to remember when you're doing something like that is I need to make sure that the branch that comes out this direction doesn't end up crossing the branch that's coming up this direction, because eventually the two will intersect. And so what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to wire them, so instead of them intersecting, they actually end up being almost parallel with each other. We'll put some movement in them so they have some interest, but you want to make sure that whatever you do, you don't allow them to intersect. So that's those two. Now, the front main dominant branch is what we have left here. Again, if you can, you want to create different levels or different heights, even in these branches. Of course, this is the dominant trunk. This is the dominant branch of this trunk because it's larger and thicker than this one is over here. So of course, it should be higher than this one. So that's something you have to take into consideration when you're doing this as well. Like I said, there's a pretty nasty scar right here on the tree, so I'm going to probably remove down to there, and then next year, in the consequential years, it'll heal over completely. I've got a dormant branch right here, which is directly below it, and then on the front, right here, I've got another one as well. So that's just the natural place to go ahead and cut this branch. So again, using the large cutters, this is, matter of fact, well, this is a softer wooded tree. If this size branch on any other tree, I probably wouldn't use the cutters. I'd use the saw, and then I'd whittle it down with hand with either these cutters later, or use the knob cutters. But I'm actually going to take this in a couple different chops. I'm going to take an initial cut, and then I'm going to take a secondary cut to remove this. So I'm actually taking two different cuts to eliminate this branch. There we go. Now I also want to clean this up a little bit. Taking care not to damage the buds that we want to take over for next year. Use these smaller cutters now. Actually, grab my knob cutter real quick. These knob cutters. And these are the knob cutters I was talking about. They're more rounded, where your concave cutters have a point on them, and these are good for getting in there and creating the site for the callousing to heal back to. Okay. Alright, that's that. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Nothing too crazy. Now, as I don't know if you can see it or not, but I've got a couple branches here which are dormant bud areas, and then I've got one in the back here as well. So those are going to go in opposite directions as the ones that we're going to use for here. And of course, let's get this one done also. Probably going take that one here. Yeah. That'll look good. So I'm just going to use this one. Okay. So that is the future of this tree as you see it now. We've got our number one trunk, our main branch, our secondary branch on that trunk. Different heights, different directions. I've got one coming out this way and one going this way. This one here I've got one coming back and one going forward, which of course we may need to train it so it's back. It'll come forward, but it's going to come up and backwards. So keep that rounded canopy look of the tree. Next we've got number two trunk. And on number two trunk we've got two branches here that are going to be going these directions. And then we've got number three trunk. And number three trunk we've got two that are going in different directions. So that's it for this tree for this year, other than, like I said, I'm going to be brushing the moss off the base of the trunk and getting it away from the roots as well. These really craggy trees, you got to really keep the moss in check on them. Sometimes you can even spray a lime sulfur solution or a mild bleach diluted with water solution on there to kill them off, to kill the moss off as well. So that's pretty much it for this tree. We'll revisit this one again in spring after it's blown buds out, because it's going to back bud like crazy and there's going to be branches all over the place. And then we're going to have to go back and selectively reduce all those back to two main dominant branches on each dominant trunk. That way we can start our ramification process, because if you let back bud and you let all those little branches all over the place grow, it's just going to be a mess. And right now we need to work on structure. Once we get the basic structure down, then the ramification comes naturally. So. Thanks for watching. Thanks for your comments, your views. If anybody has any questions, feel free to post the comments down below, or you can send me a private message.